this is really a way of talking about EVs, because what I found striking is you have Daimler cutting its dividend, cutting its workforce as they shift to EVs, and then Tesla being like, yeah, I'll raise some money because people keep throwing money at us, basically.
Yeah, you can kind of look at it a couple different ways. One of them is like, okay, look, they starved the CapEx budget last year. That allowed them to improve their financials. That ran up the stock, and now it's an opportune time to do it. I think that might be is giving them too much credit. It might just be more a question of, look, there's an opportunity now to very easily raise money without too much dilution. And look, the global auto market is looking kind of shaky. Sales are going to probably be down again this year. They were down last year. They were down the year after that. That's still while the economy is growing. So having all that money in the door when they've got all these projects they're trying to build is probably a good thing. So, and this leads us to sort of the EV transition. Bloomberg NEF is one of the more aggressive on when we see how we see EV adoption pick up. Does the global slowdown, does that slow this down? The lack of subsidies, like, how do you see it? Yeah, I think it is starting to slow it down. And what you're starting to see is that the EV market is behaving a little bit like the broader auto market. As it gets bigger, it starts to be influenced by some of these big factors. So you saw January sales data in China, for example, way down for the global auto sector, also way down for EVs. Whereas in the past, EVs had kind of bucked that trend because they were really the early adopters. But what happens now is as you get into those bigger numbers, you start to be hit by some of those bigger cyclical factors. Neil, how do you look at EVs and autos right now? Well, we in general, can't get as excited as US investors about the opportunity in EV because we're not sure it's actually the right technology. You know, it's not clear that all electricity is going to be produced on a renewable basis, in which case if you're using coal to fuel your Tesla, you know, is that actually helping the fight of climate change? What we're starting to see is the removal of subsidies. So if you go to somewhere like Norway, you're finding that Audi now has half the market for e-vehicles, whereas 2 years ago Tesla had 100%. So as I think we start to see the competition emerge, you know, both at the top end and progressively at the lower end, it'll be interesting to see whether the quality of Tesla's products stands up to the test. Yeah, just a point on the environmental side. I mean, we've done a lot of work looking at this. A lot of other groups have too. Even in a place that has a lot of coal-fired power, you still have an overall advantage from an EV. It's marginal if it's all coal, but most places have a growing share of renewables, and a lot of them have gone through a lot of coal to gas switching. So the environmental profile of a comparable vehicle is still better. But I agree, there is a lot of competition coming, and I don't know. I think Tesla relishes that competition. They like squaring up for a fight, and I think you're going to see more competition in that. They do still have a bit of a technology edge, though, and I wouldn't discount that. And a theme for June or August and in Tokyo for the Olympic Games is hydrogen. You're going to see Honda and Toyota right out there. So I think we need to open our eyes that there are going to be many different solutions. And the valuation of Tesla implies they're going to be the only one standing. Which is a great point, because I feel like if you look at China and sort of the shift to these cleaner cars, there is fuel cell technology. There is the talk of hydrogen. I don't get that same type of intensity of conversation when it just is, say, for the U.S. Yeah, I think the challenge with hydrogen is where do you get the demand in the short term? Everyone can sort of say, look, in the long term, if we have this level of demand, here's what happens to the price curve or the cost curve, and it gets cheaper, and we don't need all these subsidies in the long term. But the real question is, where does the short-term demand come from? What is the killer app for hydrogen in the short term? And if you look at more and more of the statements from the automakers, more and more of them are actually backing away from the passenger car market and saying really heavy-duty trucking, that's a good application for fuel cells. Process industry and heat, that's a good application for hydrogen. I think you're going to see more acknowledgement that there are different solutions for very different segments of the market, but I'm not that optimistic on passenger fuel cell vehicles, certainly in the next few years, certainly not in the next few years. Do you buy autos right now? I don't. I mean, my concern with cheap money for the last 4 or 5 years and the cash for clunkers 7 or 8 years ago is we've all bought a car on cheap money because Volkswagen or, dare I say it, Ford can borrow cheaper than JP Morgan. And so they've done so, and they have given us free money to buy their cars. So I think they've pulled forward, unfortunately, a lot of demand, and a lot of these companies are now well engineered. You know, most people are not ashamed to drive a 10-year-old car anymore. So cars are staying on the road a long time, and they still look pretty good. My husband still wants to get a new car. I'm like, it's only 9 years old. What's the problem? It runs fine.